All right. Okay. And then another thing that nobody likes to talk about is Brett. And so if you have a higher pH wine, you are also susceptible to other spoilage microorganisms like Brett. So even if it's there, if your pH is lower, it's a lot more manageable. You can catch it before it really blows up, and that's a key thing. So what we did in the company is we took analytical data from our Paso Robles Paso Robles laboratory and our Windsor laboratory, and we collected all kinds of data to see what we could find. When they came to us for the vintage report, we're like, okay, well, we have all this data. What can we see about this last year? And so we looked at pH, TA, alcohol, VA, and then we looked over the last 5 years also to see if there was anything different about this year. And we looked at over 10,000 samples from Paso, 100,000 from Windsor. And one of the key things I want to note is that these weren't just random samples. It wasn't just samples that were brought in for like VA and glue-free or just pH. Every one of the numbers that we used are from one of our panels. So that means that every time we have a VA number, it has a pH that goes with it. So these aren't just random. And a lot of the time, this is the panel that is ran at the end of fermentation. So once everything is complete and you want to know the status of everything that's going on in your wine, this is the panel that gets ran. So it's a pretty good place to look. So here, this is the display of the pHs that we've seen. So we kind of grouped all of the under 3.5 here together. So it looks like it's a lot. That's all of the wines that were under 3.5. What we really want to look at is everything that's over, and so we split it up into blocks because the wines that are at risk for spoilage are above 3.5. And so the thing that I want to point out is that above 3.5, like it's not really, just kidding. Okay, it's not really changing that much, but the thing that is changing is the ones that are on the higher end. So if you look at the brown bars that are on the right, those are this past harvest for this past year. And you can see the ones that are higher, the 3.8, 3.9 to 4, those are the ones that are increasing. And so those are the ones that are at more, even higher risk of spoilage organisms. So that environment in that wine or in that must is where you're going to see your lacto and pedio really thriving. And then this is a display of all the VAs that we have. And these are all the Paso Robles. We did look at all the Windsor numbers also, but because we're here in Paso, we're just looking at the numbers that we got for Paso Robles area. And so this is the area that we care about because everything above 0.05 VA is what matters because the acetic acid sensory level is right at around 0.05. Of course, it depends on the wine and the matrix, but basically this is the area. Anything underneath that isn't perceptible, isn't really bothersome. So what you can see here is that the amount of wines that are above that sensory threshold are 72 and 73%. And so this last year, the fact that it's only up 1% may not seem that big of a deal, but the fact that we're increasing in itself is what I find a little troubling. So it's something that we need to maybe focus on in the future. And so here, this is based on, these are all the wines that we looked at that were below 3.5. As you can see, it has a nice kind of bell curve shape. And so if we look at underneath that line, we have 43% of the wines had an imperceptible amount of VA and 57% had possibly a perceptible amount of VA. So remember, this is under 3.5, so this isn't the wines that we're necessarily worried about. Now if we look at the wines that are above 3.5, this is where you can see that bell curve is kind of shifted over a little bit, and that now underneath that 0.05 mark, we have 22% of the of the wines having a non-perceptible amount, that 78% now had enough VA that is probably perceptible. Like I said, depending on the matrix of the wine. And so this is like if you take anything away from this, this is what matters the most, I believe, is that we found this strong correlation between high pH and having a higher VA or higher predominance of VA. So it's not necessarily that, yes, if you have a higher pH, you will have a high VA, but obviously you're creating the type of environment that you're letting, or there's organisms in there that can create VA, and it just can be problematic. So there's a few different steps you can take to try to keep that pH down. And I understand that right now, especially, is really hard. Like some of the previous speakers talked about how with the drought we have high salination, which is making our pHs high, and so we're almost like screwed right from the beginning. So so even though you want to pick early, those bricks are shooting up. I mean, your pH might already be higher than you want. And so you have to really think about all of these steps, like in the vineyard, when you're deciding when to pick, when you're fermenting, when you're using things like tartaric acid, etc. Is there anything you can do to keep that pH down? Because you really, I mean, we make great wines in this area and we want to protect them. And so why go through all of this work if in the end you have to end up dealing with things like spoilage, and that's something that none of us really would want to have to deal with. That's pretty much it. Yeah. For sure.